You might have recently picked up on a new buzzword that's been circling around, and that buzzword is woke. Whether it's a fresh term in your vocabulary or you've been hip to it for a while, maybe you've been clued in and tried to spread the word without getting much traction, or perhaps this is the first time you've bumped into the term woke, having been out of the loop till now. Either way, I can bet you that you've crossed paths with it. It's been sweeping through our culture in the last decade, infiltrating everything from your go-to brands, to your bench-watching shows and blockbusters, even to your favorite sports now, and even worming its way into political chatter. So what does woke actually mean? And why are businesses, who have traditionally steered clear of political and social spotlights, now seemingly falling over themselves to jump onto this woke bandwagon? First, let's cut through all the confusion. If you've been thinking woke simply means being hyper-aware and subscribing to conspiracy theories, that's off the mark. But you're not totally out in the left field. If you figured woke implies being enlightened about some hidden state-run cabal, again, not quite right. About the definition, that is. There's a school of thought that posts woke as an adjective born out of African English, signifying an alertness to prejudice and discrimination. However, in the arena of American politics, what has woke morphed into? What does it truly stand for in our political landscape? What does it really mean to be woke today? At its core, woke is a daily awakening to an ongoing struggle against unseen injustices pervading our society that many simply just can't see. I find it useful to distill them into three primary categories: race, gender, and climate. This is key to remember. Those championing wokeism are typically pegged as extreme left progressives. Some even argue a tag like Marxist is both more accurate and easier to spit out. Much like a parasite invading and corrupting a host, woke operates in a similar fashion. Because to be truly woke, you must set aside all objective facts and deny any singular reality or absolute truth. You're expected to claim systemic racism against black individuals without the need for concrete proof. You also have to accept that biological men can conceivably become pregnant. Lastly, when it comes to climate and the environment, you should worship at the feet of Saint Greta until we achieve net zero carbon emissions. Woke isn't a half-hearted sentiment. It's an ideology that the brain embraces like a religion. Hence, this ideological takeover can be termed as a mind virus. Let's call it the woke mind virus. So why are companies suddenly going woke? Why are they prioritizing social and political causes over basic business principles? Why on earth would Bud Light put Dylan Mulvaney, a TikTok star who mainly attracts a teenage audience, on their beer can? Hold on a second. Speaking of beer cans and TikTok, if you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe on our channel, The Cove Network. Smash that like button on this video like someone just handed you a Bud Light can, even if it's a super hot summer day. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Cove_Network. We promise we're way cooler than having your face on a simple beer. Now back to our topic. Why would Adidas launch a swimwear line for trans women, showcased by a model with a bulge sticking out that's bigger than a head or a melon? Why are companies suddenly committing this financial suicide? Why would Coca-Cola offer training on white privilege to employees, or prioritizing diversity over competence in their hiring practices? Maybe the more relevant question is, what's in stake if they don't? To tackle this question, we need to wind the clock back to day one. No, not day one when you were born, but the day ESG, or environmental social governance, came into play. These are the three categories that a company is scrutinized under to determine their commitment to diversity, inclusivity, and environmental responsibility. On January 20th, 2021, his very first day in office, President Joe Biden essentially kickstarted the current wave of wokeness, instructing federal agencies to self-evaluate their alignment with ESG values. According to the New York Post, he highlighted the unbearable human cost of systemic racism and demanded an ambitious whole-of-government equity agenda. Further, he tasked every federal agency with evaluating the extent to which these programs and policies uphold systemic barriers against marginalized groups, among other things. But you'd have to be foolish and very naive to think that all of this just started a couple years ago. We've seen companies face backlash for not implementing trans-friendly bathrooms or for not hiring employees based on their race and gender long before 2021. This pressure to be woke or ESG friendly has been building since well before the Trump and Obama eras. It was evident long before 2021 that there was a well-organized and well-funded effort to undermine companies that did not roll in ESG-friendly changes. Evidence points towards nonprofits under the guise of social justice morphing into platforms for political activism. A notorious example is the Human Rights Campaign, which according to financial records is funded by George Soros' Open Society Foundation. The HRC lobbies Congress to pass ESG-friendly policies and has developed a new, arbitrary measuring index to determine just how woke a company truly is. They coined it the Corporate Equality Index. This index ranks companies on their wokeness, with some scoring high, others low, and many falling somewhere in between. The 1792 Exchange Report disclosed that 50% of companies are at a low risk of becoming woke, while 30% are at a medium risk and 12% are at extremely high risk. Some of these high-risk companies include the likes of YouTube, GoDaddy, Amazon, Etsy, Salesforce, Bank of America, GoFundMe, and JP Morgan. So what happens when a company doesn't comply with ESG, or perhaps scores low on their CEI index? Well, it's not like the government can imprison you or close your business for non-compliance. What they can actually do is exert significant amount of influence. The first order of business is to engage the nonprofits like the HRC. The HRC can apply pressure on board members and executives to initiate certain changes, such as installing trans-friendly facilities or conducting white privilege training for employees. If a company complies, it's typically left alone to implement these changes. But what if you don't comply? This is when the nonprofits unleash activists to carry out a full-scale campaign against the company, staging protests on the streets and online, and utilizing high-profile figures to amplify their message. You might remember how Barstool Sports fell prey to this type of cancer culture, or how Aunt Jemima's syrup brand was abruptly compelled to change its name. Let's not forget the terrible Washington, D.C. football team that had to switch its franchise name. These are just a few examples of brands that fell victims to activist pressure launched by organizations like the HRC for simply scoring low on the fake woke meter. As we dissect this topic more, we learn more and more that such organizations are simply just tools for the government to force their ESG policy changes on these big companies. Seeing one company after another fall victim to such activism would get you worried, wouldn't it? That's why companies are willing to suffer a 25% loss in sales like Bud Light, or follow Target's lead even if it means losing $10 billion in 10 days. They're scared of organizations like the HRC, who in a matter of weeks, if not days, can cripple your business into nothing. They'd rather take a hit now than risk losing everything. And that's cancel culture for you. That's exactly how it works.